Today, we will delve into a Yoga Sutra in which Maharishi Patanjali unusually talks about Easwara. Chapter 1, verse 23 or Sutra 23 says, Īśvara pranidhānādvā or Īśvara pranidhānādvā. 2-3 definitions are there by various eminent scholars for this. The ending expression is va, that is or. So, first definition says or Samadhi is attained. Samadhi, this verse sutra doesn't talk about Samadhi. But what is attained? So it says or Samadhi is attained by devotion with total dedication to God, Easwara. Or Asampragnata Samadhi can be attained by wholehearted devotion and dedication to God or Easwara, which displaces self-centered personal desires and naturally fosters contemplative absorption. Or Samadhi comes through surrender to awareness. Or success is attained by those who surrender to God. In the expression Easwara, East means to rule, to own, to command, to be valid or powerful, to be master of, to reign, or supreme spirit. And Vara means valuable, eminent, choicest, most excellent. This is the combination. So, combining this, we arrive at the one ruler, supreme ruler, or the supreme master, supreme commander, who is most valuable, most eminent, choicest, most excellent, better than the best. Bhagavad Gita verse says, within the hearts of all beings resides the Supreme Lord Easwara, and by the Lord's power, the movement of all beings are orchestrated as if they were figurines on a carousel. Devotion to Easwara harnesses the power of a loving, devoted heart to one's spiritual quest. Devotion and dedication directed to Easwara have the power to awaken selfless love, the perfect inner environment for attaining self-mastery, and which is also a natural counterforce to all vices, all bad qualities, and limitations. Maharishi Patanjali gives no physical description of Easwara. Think of Easwara as a screen upon which any norm, name, and form of the divine can be projected. Wherever the devotee perceives the qualities of Easwara, that is Easwara for the devotee. This is the next verse, which is referred here to elaborate on the divinity, on the Easwara. So that is why even one's guru can be taken as a form or expression of Easwara. Swami Rama writes, in the Upanishads, the word Easwara is to denote a state of collective consciousness, or what we say in all the Vedanta sessions as universal consciousness or pure consciousness. Thus, God is not being that sits on a high pedestal beyond the sun, moon, and stars. God is actually the state of ultimate reality. But due to lack of direct experience, God has been personified and given various names and forms by religions throughout the ages. When one expands one's individual consciousness to the universal consciousness, it is called self-realization. For the individual self has realized the unity of diversity, the very underlying principle or universal self beneath all forms and names. Unquote. Couple of definitions talked about attaining Samadhi with reference to this verse. Samadhi comes by grace alone. There is nothing we can do to attain it. So, it is a thing which can be not attained. We can at best say it can be realized. Or can we say it is realized? This question, let us flag it off. We will address this question towards the end of today's Satsang talk. Pranidhana is devotion or dedication or displays self-centered personal desires. So, īśvarapraṇidhāna translates to holding within and in front of, or profound religious meditation, or attention paid to, or fixing, or endeavor, or respectful conduct, or abstract contemplation of Easwara. Easwara we have already dealt with. Īśvarapraṇidhānam nudges us to look to Easwara or God. It is here that we find that we have always been loved and that we need not do anything to earn that love. Our worthiness is innate in us. Nothing else is needed. Talking about devotion, the extreme devotion makes the aspirant surrender completely to the God. He sees everything as the manifestation of God, every activity as the will of the God. The attribution of everything and every activity to God makes the worshipper not to bother about anything or about any activity. According to the Bhakta, no activity is good or bad. He finds nothing as favorable or unfavorable because there is no need for any judgment. A complete dispassion towards anything is the result of such surrender. Nothing has the capacity to disturb his mind to make any modifications. Samadhi is reached automatically by such surrender. Let us look at Sri Osho's unique exposition of surrender. Earlier, many years before, his closest friend, Sakha, who is in US now, used to share with him that Osho's commentary are out of the world. He just took it and left it at that. But as in the context of Yoga Sutras, when he is getting into the Osho's commentaries, we say that Rishi Moolam, Nadi Moolam should not be seen. So, without getting into the history or whatever the criticisms against him, this master, let us just like the bees fly, and they are not bothered about the flower, they just take the honey and then suck the honey and go away. Let us take the good things, the commentaries about this master. So, he is explaining surrender. What is surrender to God? How can you surrender? How surrender will become possible? That too becomes possible if you make many efforts and you go on failing. You make many efforts. You depend on yourself. Effort depends on oneself. It is a willpower, the path of the will. You are depending on yourself. You fail and you fail. You stand up, again you fail. You stand up again and you again start walking. And then a moment comes when you have been falling and falling or failing and failing. And you come to see that your effort itself is the cause. Your falling is the result of your effort, says this master. Why? Because your effort has become your ego. Or can we say your effort is in the backdrop of your ego? Go back to the Atma Bodha verse in this context. Action born out of ignorance do not have the capacity to move your wheels. See, your effort, the master says, itself is arising out of your ego, your willpower. So, anything born out of your ego, how can it remove your ego? And maybe because of that ego, your efforts are not yielding you success and you are failing. A man who is working on the path of will, making efforts, methods, using techniques, doing this and that, is bound to accumulate a certain sense of I am superior, I am special, I am extraordinary, I am doing this and that. Austerities, fasting, sadhana, I have done this much. On the path of will, one has to be very, very watchful about ego, because the ego is bound to come. If you can watch the ego and you do not accumulate ego, there is no need to surrender either, because if there is no ego, there is nothing to surrender. This has to be understood very, very deeply. And when you are trying to understand Patanjali, this is a very fundamental thing. If you make your effort continuously for many lives, the ego is bound to arise. You have to be very watchful. You should work, you should make all efforts, but do not gather the ego. Then there is no need to surrender. You may hit the target without surrendering. If the ego is there, then the need arises to surrender. That is why Patanjali says, after talking about intense, sincere, total effort, he suddenly says, īśvarapraṇidhānādvā. Success is also attained by those who surrender to God. Unquote. Dear all, here comes the significance of the karma and the MBCA sessions taught to you decade ago. Going by Osho's definition or description of the surrender, sincere sadhakas are hereby warned not to give up efforts, because this master has convinced us that efforts are born out of ego. There is no need for effort. No. That is not what he is telling. He is telling, even when you are making your best efforts in any of the path, karma, jnana, bhakti, watch out that you do not gather ego. Any spiritual activity is taken up. Why? Basically, any spiritual activity, whether it is bhakti to the Supreme Lord or the path of wisdom, self-inquiry as to who am I, all these are ultimately the goal, whether the bhakta realizes or not. Of course, one who is in the path of wisdom is made aware of this, even while he goes through Viveka Vairagya in the 4 qualifications. But the ultimate purpose of all the paths, all spiritual endeavor is to get rid of our ego. So, here the master wants us, never ever gather ego in your spiritual path, in your notion of surrendering. When you say, I have surrendered, who is that I? It is your little ego. That is why he always says, surrender the surrenderer. Right? Now, come to the last letter, Va. Va translates to or on, or either. The word Va or appears in the sutra for a reason. The implication suggested by the simple word casts an interesting light on the process of choice. Va is also the root of Vayu, the Hindu god of wind. Vayu is regarded as the breath of the cosmos, as spirit, and as the mantra Om. Vayu, as cosmic wind, saturates, shatters, and cleanses. So, could it be that or is only meant to simply present us with 2 choices to mull over? Or could it be a subtle call to attempt to tune into which the direction the spiritual wind is blowing? A clear, meditative mind can often trace the subtle movements of life that have been and are shaping us. Everything is just a seed, a potentiality to become a god. When you reach the highest, beyond which nothing exists, you become God. Again, this is Master Osho's commentary. Many have reached before you, many will reach, and many will be reaching after you. Everyone becomes a god finally, because everyone is a god potentially. Infinite gods exist in this universe. Whether you know it or not, you carry a god within your womb. And you may miss it many times, but how can you miss it ultimately? If you carry it within you, someday or the other, the seed is going to flower. You cannot miss it absolutely, says the master. Nobody is forcing you or creating you. Your freedom is absolute. You can commit a sin because of your freedom. You can move away from your sin because of your freedom. You suffer because of your freedom. And when you understand this, there is no need to suffer. You can come back, that too because of freedom. Nobody is bringing you back. Nobody is there to judge you except your own being. You are the doer. You are the judge. You are the criminal. You are the law. You are all. You are a miniature existence, says the master. Here he says you have absolute freedom. Actually, we have learned that you have limited freedom. Okay, what we call as purushartha. Limited freedom. The neutral arrows, which we learnt in the karma session, which with the intention with which you are using those arrows, whether you are using it for your spiritual evolvement or using it with pure intellect, or you are using it with your raga dvesha fueled by your vasanas, you can get the result as red arrows or white arrows, which gets accumulated in your sanchita karma. We learnt in the karma session. But here he says absolute freedom, because this absolute should not be taken in the literary sense. The master is saying absolute freedom because he is elaborating with the freedom what all you can do. You can falter, you can commit a sin, you can go far away from God, you can return, and you can retrace to the source. So the significance of how you can use these limited choice of your neutral arrows to amplify the magnitude of that freedom, the master has referred this as absolute freedom. You have to be clear about the limited choice you have. Then you can neither use absolute nor use limited. It's freedom. Purushartha. Now, as we come to the end of this satsang, combining dedication, surrender, Easvara, and Samadhi. These lines he quickly jotted after meditating on the entire commentary of Osho and everything, all descriptions of others. He meditated and meditated on behalf of sadhakas, devotees, as to what perhaps God wills to teach us through this verse. So, whatever came from the source, he just noted down, and then he is just giving it for the devotees, present and future, spiritual aspirants, present or future. It goes like this. Through continuous efforts, when one surrenders what he is not, that is, one surrenders the ego and let go his ego. Here we have to be careful, brothers and sisters. We are making efforts to surrender our ego or to transcend our ego. We should be taking clue from Master Osho's lines. We should be very careful, extraordinarily careful, that our pursuing this path of surrender to go beyond ego, this path or our pursuit or our efforts should not be tainted with ego. The efforts itself, if it is tainted with ego, then how can you go beyond ego to the path of surrender? This question is worth putting to ourselves a million times in our spiritual sadhana. Is there any trace of ego that I am doing? Khalas, you are down back to square one. You have to start from zero, first step, to go to 18th step. This falling due to ego can happen even in the 17 and a half step. And this falling can happen 1,000 times in several births. So it is like a chicken egg situation where we say that we have to make continuous efforts without ego to surrender our ego and go beyond our ego. Then Easwara, or collective pure consciousness, Nirguna Nirakara, mysteriously somehow showers grace on the one who has surrendered their ego, and the Iasvara takes them to the state of Samadhi or self-realization. To those who pursue both Nirguna or as well as Saguna, God without form, pure consciousness, or God with form in our understanding, Satyasai, it is very easy for us to understand that when we have surrendered our ego, our Sai holds our hands and takes us to his abode, Prashanti, or the state of Samadhi, with which we started this verse, or self-realization. Here, he reveals something to you which he has not talked about in many years. For quite some time, this has been going on within him. So today comes the revelation. Self-realization actually is the expression given by the Western world when they came to East, and then they underwent all the spiritual teachings of our masters, realized masters. And when they started writing commentary, and when they started writing about the ultimate Samadhi or ultimate truth consciousness, they coined this expression self-realization. But many times, seated in meditation, existing in Samadhi, he has felt that this word realization is not a true expression of oneness with God or the merger of individual consciousness with the universal consciousness. Most of the times, 99.9%, one can only realize something which is outside him. Whereas Samadhi or union with God or merger of Atman with Brahman is not realizing something, but it is one's natural state when the ego is surrendered. Going back to that sculptor's chiseling of Krishna, all that which was not Krishna, and ultimately Krishna was there already. It is not about realizing something. It is just about efforts, sadhana to ultimately remove or go beyond Maya and avidya. Go beyond the source of your ego, source of your kleshas. Then this is the goal. Actually, even attaining samadhi or attaining union with God is not the goal in spiritual sadhana, especially in the path of wisdom. The goal is to remove our so-called avidya. The goal is to go transcend our ego. And without īśvarapraṇidhānādvā, without surrender, it cannot happen. So once through surrender, you have got rid of your ego, then you verily shine as that you have always been. Never mind how many births you have gone through to reach this self-discovery, if we may call it thus. So let us not call it a self-realization. And we call it a self-experience, that sounds better. But even self-experience does not fully express that state. In fact, no words are there to express that ultimate state. That is why Ashtavakra, after 20 chapters, ultimately leaves Janaka saying that what more shall I say? Nothing emanates from me. In the 20th chapter. This comes towards somewhere in the middle of the 20th chapter verses. Nothing emanates from me. Curious sadhakas can search for this expression in the Ashtavakra Gita. Is he not being over, what do you say, optimistic that anyone will go and search? Anyways, it just came, he has expressed. So, that is why in the Vibhu Gita, the expression Mahamaunam comes. That one verse from the Vibhu Gita, the first verse on the chapter on the Videha Bhukta, on one hand, this first verse, on the other hand, Nirvana Shataka. And on the third, that Yat Kataksha from Viveka Chudamani. Maybe he got fixed in these three for 1 year. Without the least trace of thoughts, in and as pure awareness of self. Existing in undiluted bliss. the Videha Mukta, exists in Maha Mauna. This is the essence of that verse, which he also gave as a session around 2013-14. And one sadhaka was blessed to come to the kutir, sit and take that session, if that sadhaka is going to ever listen to this talk. So, Samadhi is attained by devotion and with a total dedication to God. We have dealt elaborately on each of these expressions, on what is devotion and what is total dedication or total surrender, what is Iasvara and what is Samadhi, and what is even going beyond the awareness of being in Samadhi. Hari Aum Tatsat. Jai Sai.